All right, I'm going to talk about Oregon quarterback Dillon Gabriel, Ohio State quarterback Will Howard. Talk about keys for success for each quarterback. We got 4 or 5 keys that we're going to talk about. Then we have a clip of film from each quarterback that demonstrates what they need to do repeatedly. I think the most important key, we'll show that at the end of the video. But I want to talk about each quarterback, do a big quarterback preview. But also let's talk about the defenses. So we're going to talk about Ohio State's defense first, maybe preview them real quick, then talk about Dillon Gabriel and what he needs to do against this defense in round 2 of their matchup, and then talk about Oregon's defense, then we'll talk about Will Howard and his main keys, then we'll look at the film. So let's talk about Ohio State's defense first. So they've only given up more than 17 points this season one time, and that was against, obviously, Oregon when they gave up 32 in that loss. But they are the number 1 defense in the Big Ten in points per game, only 10.9 points per game, which probably puts them number 1 in the nation, or at least at the very top in those in that stat. Number 1 in the Big Ten in yards given up per game. Number 1 in the Big Ten in passing yards given up per game, only 144. And number 2 in the Big Ten in sacks. So very good defense that has had a lot of success this season, with the exception of Oregon. So when they played Oregon in the first round, let's talk about what they did differently, because there's one thing that they did differently compared to the other games in the Big Ten. So they blitzed 36% of Dillon Gabriel's dropbacks, and they had 0 sacks. That's the least amount of blitzing they did in any Big Ten game. Most Big Ten games on quarterback dropbacks, on passing downs, they were blitzing 50% of the time. So a very aggressive defense, a defense that wants to get after the quarterback, but they didn't have much success against Oregon. There were a few reasons why, and we're going to get into that here in a second. But my biggest question is, do they decide to bring more? Because they had 0 sacks. They only blitzed 36% of the time. So will they decide to bring more? What are they going to do differently? I'm sure they're game planning and scheming something differently, but will they decide to bring more? Do they defend differently in the back 7? What kind of schemes do they throw at Oregon? So they will do something. They'll change and make some type of modification. It just determines what that change will be, and also like how much will they change. Maybe they just say, hey, let's just play better. Dillon Gabriel made some really, really good throws. Let's make him make those throws again. So that's the Ohio State defense, one of the best defenses in the nation. What will they change differently? Or will they just have their defense say, hey, let's see if you can make these throws again. So that leads us to Dillon Gabriel, who I think probably played his best game of the season, or one of his best games, against Ohio State in their first game. He was 23-34, 341 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 32 yards on the ground, then a touchdown. He had a long run of 27 yards. That made up for most of his rushing yards. But this is his second highest quarterback rating, according to ESPN, the entire season. Again, played excellent in game 1, probably his best game of the season. And that's what it took to beat Ohio State, and they still only won by 1. And you could argue that if Howard didn't slide, if he threw it out of bounds or ran out of bounds, that maybe they kicked the field goal and win in game 1. But still, it took Gabriel playing his best football to beat Ohio State. So that's probably what it's going to take again. So what did his best football look like? Well, key number 1, and we're going to look at this on film, is he hit on deep throws. Again, he had 341 yards passing, and 177 of those 341 yards passing came on 4 completions. He was 4 of 4 where the ball was thrown 20 yards or more in there. So my big question mark is, can he do that again? Can he make these tight covered throws? Can he push the ball downfield and complete it again against Ohio State's defense? Because that was huge on why they ended up winning the game. Key number 2, they're a heavy play action team, but they utilize play action even more against Ohio State than usual. So I think they'll need to do that again, or will they need to do that again? Is probably the correct question. 52% of his dropbacks were off or play action. He was 13 of 18 for 207 yards and 72% completion percentage off of play action. Whenever he had a straight drop back, whenever it was non-play action, he was still good. His completion percentage dropped by 10, so it wasn't as accurate. But throughout the season, he was fantastic in play action and dropping straight back. But if you're Ohio State, can you take away the play action, take away the threat of play action beating you, and can Dillon Gabriel be good enough to beat you without the help of play action? If you go off what he did this season, the answer is probably yes. He had 20 touchdowns and 3 interceptions without the use of play action, so still extremely good. But again, this is Ohio State, this is round 2, so can they force you to rely on something else? Key number 3, can you have success regardless if Ohio State dials up the pressure more, if they bring less pressure, or if it's the exact same? Game 1, when Ohio State dropped 7 or 8 into coverage, again, it was the majority of the passing downs. Gabriel was 16-22 for 238 yards passing, 10.8 yards per attempt, 72% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. Against the blitz, he was 7 of 12, 58% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. So his completion percentage went down by what, 14-ish around, give or take, right under 14% against the blitz. So does Ohio State see that? Do they blitz more? Do they think there's something there? Again, he still was okay against the blitz. It just wasn't, he just didn't have to be good against the blitz as much as he was good against them dropping 7 or 8 because they didn't blitz as more. And the last key, will he use his legs more? Now, he had 30-something yards on the ground, but the majority of those yards came on one run. So will he use his legs more? Does he need to use his legs more in a must-win game? So we're going to look at the most important key at the very end of the video for Dillon Gabriel. We're going to look at some film or just one throw I think will be the most important thing. If he can make this type of throw, which we'll look at the end, I think Oregon can, in fact, win again. So